A Reddit user posed a thought-provoking question. Serious, what's the creepiest paranormal activity you ever encountered? Bit of background. When my wife was young, her parents and siblings lived with one set of her grandparents. Her grandfather was murdered in the home. It happened in his bedroom upstairs. The room was used primarily as storage for the next 20+ years. Her parents tried to sell the house multiple times, but living in a small town, everyone knew and the house would not sell, so they stayed. Years later, and while my wife and I were engaged, there was a murder trial which I attended in support of her family. I saw the crime scene photos, important later. Another few years later, we had 2 kids, the oldest was 6 at the time. My wife's family does not talk about the murder, and our kids do not know about the murder to this day. My Phil decided he wanted the room where the murder happened to be a hangout for the grandkids when the family was in town. He put sleeping bags and a TV in the room ahead of a holiday, days-long get-together. We didn't like it but stayed silent since the murder was a sore subject. My Phil also wanted all the grandkids to all sleep in there together. We were the first to arrive and my son went into the room alone. He usually couldn't sit still long at that age, so after a couple of hours I decided to check in on him. Here is our conversation. During the whole conversation, he was still and rigid and would not look away from the TV. "Hey buddy, is everything okay up here?" "Yeah, okay, have fun." "Daddy, do I have to sleep in here?" "I don't want to." "Why not?" "I am not alone." Every hair on my body stood up. "Well yeah, I'm here with you buddy." "No, there is someone in here with us." "Are they nice?" "Mean." "A grown-up." "A kid." "A grown-up." "What are they doing right now?" "They are watching you. You have never said anything like this at your grandparents' house before and you have been here a lot." "They don't leave this room and I have never been in here before." "Where are they now?" Without looking away from the TV, he points to the far corner where his great-grandfather was murdered and said, "They are standing over there. They don't move much." "Okay buddy, you don't have to stay in here." And he left the room with me. In high school, I was babysitting for a single mom and her 2 kids. It was the middle of winter and when I arrived it was already pitch black out, around like 6 p.m. She lived in a duplex. While I was standing in the living room with her and her girls talking about how the rest of the night would go, a little boy in full snow gear came in through her front door, stomped through the living room past us and headed down the stairs to the basement. The mom never even looked at him or stopped talking. The girls didn't make any acknowledgement that they saw him. I was super weirded out but I was also an extremely introverted teenager so I didn't ask the mom what was up. Once the mom left, I asked the girls who the little boy was that came in and they both had no idea what I was talking about. So I got brave and grabbed a broom and headed downstairs. It was a small unfinished basement, one single room with no closets or anything. No one was down there and the little boy definitely had not come back upstairs in that time. So weird and the only time I have truly believed I experienced something paranormal. I normally scoff at ghost stories and stuff. My dad worked in security, I got into it after he passed. One night I was called on my night off, they need someone to go fill in on another site. I never worked the site before but hey, overtime, I accepted. It was one of my dad's old sites. So it is about 0200, I am doing a round, I enter one of the buildings and I think I see someone moving up ahead. It is 0200 and the building is locked, there should not be anyone in there. I quietly close the door behind me and creep up for a closer look. At the end of the hall is a security guard, which is odd as I am the only guard on duty at the time, so I am eyeing this guy, and I notice the uniform. It is for a company that doesn't exist anymore, in fact it is for the company my dad worked for when he was at this site. So it hits me that it is my dad. I'm standing there watching him, he is apparently doing a round of the building I am patrolling. So I watch him, he looks directly at me as if he could see me, he looks at me for about 30 seconds or so, he then turns the corner. I run to catch up with him but he was gone. Almost 2 years later I still swear I actually saw him that night. I don't know if it was a ghost, if I was hallucinating because it was one of his old posts and I was emotional, or if maybe somehow time loops exist and I actually saw him working the site in the past. I honestly don't know but every time I have a night off and they can't find anyone to fill in, I jump at it, no longer for the overtime but with the hope that whatever happened that first time happens again. I have filled in there over 20 times since that encounter and I haven't seen anything since. A couple of friends, and one hot roommate, rented a house in the next city over. One floor, had a partially finished basement. The owner started the job but never completed it, only the outer walls and one interior room were put in. The main area was open with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Scattering of old furniture around. My friends used to use the basement to host parties. Apparently, there was a standing request not to sleep down there, a request that I did not hear. We were maybe 20 or 21 at the time. Well, after one party, people started going to sleep wherever they could find space, and I picked the only open spot I could find, this old couch in that basement. I wake up after just a few hours, must have been 4 or 5 a.m., and I hear a guy and girl whispering and giggling in that partially built next room. It sounded like someone who was at the party, so I got up to ask them to be quiet, and as soon as I got near that doorway, it stopped. Weird, but I thought maybe I was hearing people still partying upstairs, and it just sounded like whispering through the floor, no biggie. It didn't start back up, so I decided to ignore it and try to go back to sleep. I laid back down. That bright light was shining in my face, and I wasn't sure how to turn it off, so I closed my eyes and just tried to fall asleep anyways. While I'm laying on the couch with my eyes closed, I saw a shadow move across my eyelids, as if something moved between me and that light. So at this point I sit bolt upright, and said, "Nope, nope, nope, nope," over and over again as I started walking towards the stairs. The cement floor was a bit uneven, so I'd hear a scuffing noise with some of my footsteps, but I'd hear it even when my shoe didn't scrape the floor. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and listened, and those shuffling footsteps kept going, so I sprinted up the stairs and paused one more time at the top and looked back and saw nothing. I don't know, I expected to see someone. I waited maybe 10 seconds, listening out, and finally I hear what sounds like a single footfall on wood and creak of that bottom stair. I shut the door behind me and backed away watching it, but nothing ever came through. I'm frantically trying to find one of my friends who rented the place without waking anyone up, and I find the roommate on an air mattress, in the living room, which is weird but whatever. I start shaking her, and I go, see, wake up, your basement is haunted." She just looks at me like I'm an idiot and says, "Duh. We told everyone not to sleep down there." And I just went, "Oh. So can I crash on the corner of the air mattress?" And she said I could. So the next day, I get all of the ghost stories from them about this house. Apparently, the main floor was haunted too, and the basement was just the worst spot for it. Ex-husband's family owns a massive farmhouse that was built in the late 1800s and has been passed down through generations. They inherited from a pair of bachelor brothers and their sister, Aunt Kate. So it goes she died in the attic, so that's why you hear pacing up there at night. She loves to take things like ex-Mills jewelry and move it around the house. The music room used to be used as the funeral parlor for that area way back in the day. They had the original furnace in the basement that looked big enough to burn bodies. One time I came home and noticed my cat was halfway off the ottoman kneading with his paws like something not there was petting him and holding the front half of him. I went over and ran my hand under him but not touching him and he fell down. X was woken up one night with a lady in white standing over him staring down at him. X is an electrician, farmer who would make shit up. Aunt Kate's room that she once lived in is freezing cold all year round. There's no AC and it gets hot and humid in that house. One time I slept in there and had 7 quilts on in the middle of summer. I went to bed with the door closed, they all squeaked loudly when opened and the wood floors squeaked too. In the middle of the night I sort of woke up feeling hands going up and down me tucking the blankets in my sides like you do with little kids. I opened my eyes even though I was terrified and nothing was there. The door was open too, which would have woken me up from loud squeak. X remarried and had a daughter who always sees an old man in overalls at the top of the stairs who doesn't WZNT her to go up. Shush is 10 now and has seen him constantly since she was little. I was walking home one night from my grandmother's house. We lived in a village in rural Ireland. Granny's house was on the outskirts of the village, so I had to walk up a narrow country lane to get to Granny's house and back down the lane to get toward the village. My granddad was dying and the priest have him the last rites. He pulled through the night and my granny told me to go home and get a bit of a rest. I reluctantly agreed and walked home. Down the country lane, I've been walking on since I was a boy. Only this time it seemed weird in some way. Almost eerie, and I never get spooked. I pushed the feeling to the side as my mind was in shock about Grandad. I was walking toward the bottom of the lane when I noticed a blur of white down the bottom of the lane beside one of the farmer's gates to the field beside my grandparents' house. I thought it was a lamb escaped. It happens a lot. I walked toward it to investigate. When I walked toward the blur of white, it felt like electricity entered every inch of my body. The hairs were standing up on my arms and what was left on the top of my head. I stood frozen in perpetual fear as the figure was an old hunched woman in a white robe, and she just screamed the most merciful scream. The guttural scream was so frightening, I actually stopped breathing with sheer fear. I looked up into her face and saw nothing, just a blur. The cry was ungodly, like a mother finding out their child is dead. The most scariest scream I've ever witnessed. Adrenaline must have kicked in because I legged it straight back up the lane toward Granny's house and legged it in the front door. I could hear my granny rushing out Grandad's room crying. She said, "Granda's gone. Imagine he just passed away within the 5 minutes of me leaving and encountering the woman on the lane." I remember telling my elderly aunt and a few family members about the woman, and they said that she was a friend of the family by now. She only appears when someone is going to die. I thought they were taking the piss until my father, a born skeptic and very religious man, confirmed the woman's existence. In some families in Ireland, she would be called the Banshee. I'll never forget her. Not even when I'm on my own deathbed will I ever forget the howl. Thank you.